It was my 72nd birthday. The rain drizzled softly outside, painting the city streets with streaks of silver and gray. I sat by my apartment window, cradling a lukewarm cup of tea, watching the droplets race each other down the glass. I thought about the years gone by, the laughter, the tears, the endless nights I stayed awake for my children. But today, there was only silence. No calls, no messages, just the gentle patter of rain and the quiet ache in my chest. For decades, I had lived for my children. I had given them everything, my dreams, my strength, my very self. I held their hands when they stumbled, wiped away their tears when the world hurt them, and stood by their side through every trial. I was their mother, their safe harbor in the storm. Yet now, I was alone, forgotten. I thought back to Emily, my daughter, with her bright eyes full of dreams that reached beyond our small town. I had told her to chase those dreams, even when it meant leaving me behind. And she did, moving to the city, building a life I was no longer invited into. The phone remained silent. I learned about her milestones through social media, promotions, engagements, celebrations. But never an invitation, never a call. One afternoon, by chance, I overheard her talking with friends, laughing dismissively about me, the mother who no longer mattered. The words cut deeper than I ever imagined. I was not just forgotten, I was discarded. Pain settled over me like a thick fog. I questioned my worth, my sacrifices, my love. Had it all been for nothing? The apartment, once filled with warmth and noise, felt hollow and cold. I would stare at the phone, hoping, praying for even a single message, but it never came. One evening, a gentle knock came at my door. It was Mrs. Jenkins, my neighbor and dear friend. She sat with me, listened as I poured out my heart, and reminded me that I was not alone. With her encouragement, I joined a community group for seniors, a place where others shared stories of loss, betrayal, and resilience. Among them, I found strength I hadn't known I possessed. Volunteering at a local shelter gave me purpose beyond the pain. I met people who had been broken but chose to heal. Their stories mingled with mine, weaving a tapestry of hope. Then, one rainy afternoon, the phone rang. It was Emily. Her voice trembled as she apologized. "I'm sorry, Mom. I was wrong to forget you." Her words opened a door I thought had long been closed. Months passed, and our fragile connection grew slowly. Meanwhile, a stray dog I named Bruno came into my life. A scruffy, loyal companion who filled the emptiness with unconditional love. One evening, Emily invited me to her home. Hesitant but hopeful, I accepted. We talked long into the night, sharing truths, regrets, and the beginnings of forgiveness. Our journey was not perfect, but it was real. Years later, our bond remains delicate yet strong. I learned that justice is often quiet, found in forgiveness, dignity, and the courage to love oneself. Now, as I sit by my window with Bruno at my feet, I am at peace. My story is one of betrayal, endurance, and unexpected love. If you ever feel forgotten, remember your worth is not defined by others. Love yourself fiercely, forgive, and find your own peace. I was a mother who was forgotten, but I am also a woman who found herself again. And that is the greatest justice of all. The silence after Emily stopped calling felt like a slow unraveling of my world. At first, I told myself she was busy, chasing her dreams, building a future I had always wanted for her. But the days turned to weeks, and the weeks to months, and the phone remained quiet. I found myself walking the halls of our home alone, touching the walls as if they could tell me the stories I longed to hear. Her old room sat untouched, like a time capsule, her stuffed animals gathering dust, her favorite books still stacked on the nightstand. One afternoon, a cold wind blew in through the slightly open window. I closed it and sat on the edge of the bed, my fingers tracing the faded wallpaper. I remembered her laughter here, the way her tiny hands had once clutched mine tightly. "Mom," I whispered to the empty room, Where did you go? But the only answer was the echo of my own voice. I tried to keep busy, baking, reading, volunteering, but the ache in my heart followed me everywhere. On holidays, the empty chair at the table was a sharp reminder of what was missing. Mrs. Jenkins was my anchor. One evening, over a cup of tea, she looked at me with kindness and said, "You gave everything to your children, but now it's time to give some love back to yourself." Her words were simple, yet profound. I realized that I had lost myself in the role of a mother, and I needed to find who I was beyond that. With trembling hope, I joined the community center group for seniors. At first, the laughter and chatter felt foreign, but slowly I began to share pieces of my story. I met Harold, a soft-spoken man who lost his son to addiction. Maria, who had been disowned by her family but found joy among strangers who became friends. And Susan, who taught me that it's never too late to rediscover happiness. One day, after a meeting, I found a small stray dog shivering under a bench in the park. His fur was matted, eyes wide with fear. I wrapped him in my scarf and took him home. I named him Bruno. Bruno didn't just fill the silence. He filled the emptiness I thought would never go away. His unconditional love was a balm to my soul. Months passed. Then one rainy afternoon, my phone buzzed. "Mom?" Emily's voice was soft, hesitant. Tears welled up. "Emily," I whispered. "I'm sorry," she said. "I was wrong to forget you." Her apology was a fragile bridge across years of pain. We started talking again, cautiously, calls filled with stutters and silence, but also hope. When she invited me to her home for the first time in years, my heart raced with anticipation and fear. Walking into her house, I saw photos of her new life, a life I had only glimpsed from afar. But I also saw something else, a longing to reconnect. That night, we spoke honestly. I told her about the nights I cried alone, the holidays spent in silence. She listened, truly listened, and told me about her struggles, the pressure, the mistakes, the guilt. Our wounds were different, but the pain was shared. Justice, I realized, was not about punishment. It was about healing, reclaiming dignity, forgiving, and choosing love. Now, with Bruno by my side and a slowly mending bond with Emily, I have found peace. I am a mother who was forgotten. But I am also a woman who found herself again, and that is the greatest justice of all. Some days, the weight of being forgotten pressed down so heavily that even breathing felt like a struggle. I'd sit by the window for hours, watching the world move on without me. The city's hustle, the chatter of neighbors, the laughter of children in the park, it all felt like a reminder of what I'd lost. Yet, amidst the loneliness, Bruno was a constant source of warmth. Every morning, he nudged my hand, reminding me that I wasn't truly alone. We walked together through quiet streets and leafy parks, and slowly, I began noticing small miracles, the way sunlight danced through the leaves, the scent of fresh bread from the bakery down the street, the soft smile of a stranger passing by. One chilly afternoon, as Bruno and I rested on a bench, an elderly man named Harold sat beside us. He smiled and said, "You know, sometimes life breaks us just so we can be rebuilt stronger." That simple thought echoed in my mind for days. At the community center, our group grew close. We shared stories that felt too heavy to carry alone, tales of lost love, betrayal, and hope. Maria, with her gentle eyes, told me, "Pain is part of life, but it doesn't have to be the end of your story." I clung to those words like a lifeline. Meanwhile, Emily's calls became more frequent, though each conversation was a delicate dance of vulnerability and fear. One evening, she said softly, "I don't expect you to forgive me right away, but I want to try." I told her, "Forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. It means choosing to heal." When she finally invited me to her home, my heart fluttered with a mix of anticipation and doubt. The door opened to a warm, bright space filled with memories both new and old. We talked for hours, not as mother and daughter perfect in understanding, But as two flawed souls trying to bridge the gap, she confessed, "I was scared to face the pain I caused you," I replied. "It's never too late to make things right." Our journey forward was neither smooth nor easy, but it was real. Together, we navigated the shadows of our past, learning to trust again. Now, as I sit by the window with Bruno resting at my feet, I feel a quiet peace. My story is one of love lost and found, of pain transformed into strength. If you ever feel forgotten, remember, your worth is never defined by those who walk away. Love yourself fiercely, forgive when you're ready, and hold on to hope. I was a mother who was forgotten, but I am also a woman who found herself again, and that is the greatest justice of all. Days turned into weeks, and the fragile threads between Emily and me grew stronger, but not without their struggles. There were moments when old wounds reopened, when silence crept back between us like a cold shadow. One afternoon, we sat in her kitchen, the scent of fresh coffee filling the air. She reached across the table and took my hand, her eyes searching mine. "Mom," she whispered, "I was selfish. I let my own fears and ambitions blind me to what really mattered. I hurt you deeply." I felt the weight of her words, but also the sincerity behind them. "Emily," I said gently, "we both lost our way. But healing begins when we choose to find each other again." That evening, as Bruno curled at my feet, I reflected on how much we had both changed. Time had passed, but the pain we carried was still real. Yet, with each conversation, each apology, each moment of vulnerability, we rebuilt the bridge between us. Outside, the city lights twinkled softly against the darkening sky, a reminder that even in the darkest nights, there is light. One morning, I visited the community center and shared my story with the group. Their eyes filled with tears and nods of understanding. Susan hugged me tight and said, "Your strength is inspiring. You've turned pain into hope." I smiled through my tears. It was true. I was no longer just a forgotten mother. I was a woman who had rediscovered her own worth. Emily's journey wasn't easy either. She faced consequences at work for neglecting relationships, realizing that success without family felt hollow. She struggled with guilt, but was determined to make amends. One day, she told me, "I want to be better. Not just for you, but for myself." That honesty was a gift I never expected. Together, we made new memories, quiet dinners, shared walks, laughter rediscovered. Our past wasn't erased, but it no longer defined us. In those moments, I understood that true justice isn't about punishment. It's about forgiveness, healing, and the courage to love again. Now, as I sit by my window, Bruno's gentle breathing beside me, I am filled with gratitude. To anyone listening, know this: you are never alone, even when it feels that way. Your heart is strong. Your story is worth telling. I was a mother who was forgotten, but I am also a woman who found herself again, and that is the greatest justice of all. Months passed, and with each day, the fragile threads between Emily and me grew stronger, but not without their challenges. Healing is never a straight line. There were days when old wounds reopened, when silence stretched between us like a chasm too wide to cross. Yet, in those moments, I reminded myself that even the smallest steps forward mattered. One crisp autumn afternoon, Emily invited me to the little cafe where she often worked late. The scent of freshly brewed coffee mingled with the soft murmur of conversation. We sat by the window, the golden light of the setting sun casting a warm glow around us. She looked at me with tired eyes, her voice barely above a whisper. "Mom, I know I can't erase the years I lost. I took for granted the love you gave me, the sacrifices you made. I was chasing success, but I forgot the most important thing: family." Tears welled in my eyes, but I smiled softly. "Emily, life is messy. We all stumble. What matters is that you've come back." She reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "I want to make things right. I want to be the daughter you deserve." In that moment, something inside me softened. The anger, the hurt, they didn't disappear, but they gave way to hope. Back at home, Bruno lay curled on the rug, his presence a comforting anchor. I looked out the window, watching leaves fall gently from the trees, swirling in the cool breeze. Change, I thought, was in the air. For Emily, for me, for us. Healing, I learned, wasn't about forgetting the pain. It was about facing it together, holding space for each other's flaws and regrets. One evening, as we shared a simple dinner, Emily spoke about her own struggles, the loneliness behind the glossy social media posts, the pressure to be perfect, the fear of vulnerability. I was afraid to come home, she confessed. Not because of you, but because I was afraid to face myself. I nodded, understanding more deeply than ever before. We had both been prisoners of our fears. Slowly, we began building new traditions. Sunday morning walks in the park with Bruno, cooking meals together, sharing stories late into the night. The silence that once haunted our home was replaced with laughter and warmth. At the community center, I shared my story with others. The pain of being forgotten, the courage it took to forgive. Their faces reflected understanding and empathy. Susan hugged me tightly, whispering, "Your journey gives us all hope." Emily's own path to redemption wasn't without setbacks. She faced challenges at work and strained friendships, consequences of years spent chasing a hollow dream. But she met those challenges with newfound humility and strength. "I'm learning what truly matters," she told me one day, tears in her eyes. And through it all, I discovered something I never expected, that justice isn't always loud or dramatic. Sometimes it's the quiet reclaiming of one's dignity, the gentle mending of broken bonds, the courage to love even when it hurts. Now, as I sit by my window with Bruno's soft breathing at my feet, I feel a peace I once thought impossible. To anyone who feels forgotten, abandoned, or unloved, know this: your worth is not defined by others. Love yourself fiercely. Forgive when you're ready, and hold on to hope. I was a mother who was forgotten, but I am also a woman who found herself again, and that, truly, is the greatest justice of all. Some nights, when the city outside quieted and the soft hum of distant traffic lulled me, memories would come rushing back like a tide I hadn't expected. I'd sit by the window, Bruno nestled beside me, and I'd see Emily as a little girl, her curly hair tangled from sleep, her bright eyes full of wonder as she clutched my hand walking to school. I remembered the bedtime stories, the whispered promises to always protect her, the way she'd laugh uncontrollably at the silliest jokes. Those moments felt so distant now, like echoes from another lifetime. I thought about the sacrifices I made, the jobs I took to keep the roof over our heads, the nights I stayed awake praying she would grow up safe and happy. And yet, despite all that love, I was left alone. There was a time when I begged myself to understand why she drifted away. Was it my fault? Had I failed as a mother? But slowly, through tears and reflection, I realized it wasn't about blame. People change. Life pulls us in directions we can't always control. Emily's absence was a wound, yes, but it was also a lesson. That love isn't always returned the way we hope, but it remains a part of who we are. One afternoon, as we sat in the kitchen, Emily told me about her struggles, the loneliness behind her busy life, the guilt she carried for neglecting me. Her voice cracked as she said, "Mom, I thought success meant everything, but without you, it meant nothing." I reached across and took her hand, feeling the fragility and strength intertwined in that touch. "It's never too late, Emily. We can heal together." We began rebuilding, one conversation at a time. Some days were harder than others. Old resentments surfaced and silence would fill the spaces between us. But we kept trying because love is worth the effort. Bruno, ever faithful, seemed to understand. He'd rest his head on Emily's lap or nudge her hand gently, as if urging us to keep moving forward. At the community center, I found solace in stories shared by others who had walked through similar fires. Susan told me once, "The heart is resilient. It breaks, but it also mends, stronger than before." Those words stayed with me as I learned to forgive not just Emily, but myself, for holding on too tightly, for the pain that lingered. Our story didn't end with perfect happiness. There were still difficult days, moments of doubt. But through it all, I discovered the true meaning of justice, the quiet reclaiming of dignity, the courage to forgive, and the grace to love without conditions. Now, as I sit by the window, watching the city lights twinkle like distant stars, I feel peace. Bruno lies peacefully beside me, and somewhere down the hall, I know Emily is building a life that includes me again. If you're listening, remember this. You are never alone, even when it feels that way. Your story is not over. Love yourself fiercely, forgive when you can, and hold on to hope. I was a mother who was forgotten, but I am also a woman who found herself again. And that, my dear friend, is the greatest justice of all. It wasn't long after our fragile reconciliation that life threw another curveball, one Emily never saw coming. Her fast-paced world began to unravel. The very success she had chased so desperately started slipping through her fingers. At work, mistakes crept in, projects fell behind, and her once trusted colleagues began to doubt her reliability. The stress was crushing. One evening, I found her sitting on the floor of her apartment, tears streaming down her face. "Mom," she said, voice barely audible, "I'm scared. I don't know who I am anymore." I sat beside her, wrapping my arms around her trembling shoulders. "Emily, you're still the same girl I raised, strong, brave, and worthy of love. Sometimes, losing everything is the hardest way to find what truly matters." Her downfall was painful to witness, but it was also a turning point, a moment of raw honesty that stripped away the facade she had built. Emily began to confront her mistakes, seeking help for the stress and loneliness that had overwhelmed her. She faced tough conversations with friends and colleagues, took responsibility for what she'd neglected, and slowly, with great effort, started rebuilding her life, this time with humility and heart. Through it all, our bond deepened in ways neither of us expected. I was no longer just her mother. I was her confidant, her safe harbor as she navigated stormy seas. One afternoon, as Bruno and I waited outside the community center, Emily came out smiling, genuinely, fully, and said, "Mom, I'm ready to live differently, to love better." That simple declaration filled me with pride and hope. Justice, I realized, wasn't about revenge or punishment. It was about growth, healing, and reclaiming dignity in the face of pain. In the quiet moments since then, I've come to understand that true justice is often gentle, found in forgiveness and in the courage to keep loving despite the hurt. Now, as I sit by my window, Bruno resting his head on my knee, I feel a peace that only comes from knowing you've survived the storm and come out stronger. If you're listening, remember this: pain doesn't have to define you. Forgiveness isn't weakness, it's strength. And love, in all its imperfect forms, can heal even the deepest wounds. I was a mother who was forgotten. But I am also a woman who found herself again. And that, my dear friend, is the greatest justice of all.